Okay, good evening, everyone. My name is Daniel Baird. I'm an event facilitator here at McNally Robinson Booksellers. And of course, we're gathered here this afternoon to celebrate the Winnipeg launch of Indigenous Rights in 1 Minute, What You Need to Know to Talk Reconciliation by Bruce McIvor, and published by Nightwood Editions. We are also gathered here on the weekend prior to the 5th National Day of Truth and Reconciliation to honor the life and work of treasured elder and tireless community builder, Theodore Niizhotay Fontaine, with Niizhotay Stories, an annual event which calls on us all to forge a healing path in the spirit of two hearts, all in collaboration with our guests, with our great friends at Plume Winnipeg as part of Thin Air 2025. And before we begin, it gives me great pleasure to call up Theodore's partner in all things, Morgan Fontaine, to offer Theodore Fontaine's beautiful land acknowledgement. So please join me in welcoming Morgan Fontaine.
Good afternoon, everyone. It's an honor to be here as part of Thin Air Festival and to share a little bit about my husband Theodore, for whom this series is named. Before I read his land acknowledgement and talk about it a little bit, I have a really beautiful message from his publisher pertaining to today, and I'd like to share it with you. Today marks the 15th anniversary of the release of his book, Broken Circle. It was launched in 2010 at the Thin Air Writers Festival, with a holding hands there with Charlene, enabling Theodore to get up in front of a very large crowd. Not his first time for doing so, but his first time as an author. This message is from his publisher, Heritage House Publishing. Heritage House was profoundly honored to work with Theodore on this deeply personal and important book in 2010, and with his wife Morgan on the commemorative edition published in 2022. Broken Circle marked a turning point in our publishing program and remains one of our most significant publications to date. Under the careful guidance of then managing editor Vivian Sinclair, the original edition changed the way we approached writing by and about Indigenous people and set us on the long path toward reconciliation. We continue to learn from Theodore's example to this day, and we are humbled that he entrusted his manuscript to us. Since its original publication, tens of thousands of readers across Canada and around the world, from residential school survivors to high school students, to historians, to people experiencing incarceration, have found truth, clarity, and healing in Theodore's words. We're proud to have played a part in helping to amplify his message. Now, Theodore did a lot of work with students and people everywhere across Canada since A Broken Circle was published. And his land acknowledgement arises from work that he did with students, early and middle grade students, primarily in Winnipeg classrooms, who asked him repeatedly, why do we hear this land acknowledgement every morning along with the morning announcements? Like there's what time is recess and now the land acknowledgement. He explained what land acknowledgements mean and why they are important to understanding and living in reconciliation. He guided these students in creation of their own land acknowledgement statements, that they would express in their own ways their understanding and their commitment to the spirit and intention of sharing this land, the traditional territories of Canada's First Peoples. This land acknowledgement was published along with some of Theodore's final writing. We acknowledge we are on First Nations land, Turtle Island, inhabited by First Nations from time immemorial. For thousands of years, First Nations people, the the Anishinaabe, Cree, Dakota, Dene, and Anishinaabe nations walked and lived on this land and knew it to be the center of their lives and spirituality. The Anishinaabe call this land Manitoua Bay, the place where the Creator resides. We acknowledge this became the national homeland of the Red River Métis. We acknowledge and welcome the many people from countries all over the world who have come to join us, Turtle Islands First Nations, in calling this our home. We acknowledge we are now bound all together by Treaty 1. Miigwech, Sheila, and for coming, for speaking here today, and for the release of your new book.
Here we are. So I'm just going to go over a few quick things before we throw it to the conversation. Just how tonight will go, as soon as I'm off here, we're going to pass it over to Bruce and Sheila for their conversation, and immediately following, there will be a Q&A portion. If you do have a question tonight, or this afternoon, I should say, just raise your hand for me to see, and I'll come by with this wireless microphone. This is just to ensure that you're able to be heard on tonight's live stream. We do have quite a few people watching tonight. And then following the close of the event, Charlene Deal, the director of Plume, will be out for the closing comments and to let you know how to get books signed as well. And I am, of course, delighted to offer a few words of introductions to our guest tonight. Your host, Sheila North, is a member of the Bonabonabee Cree Nation as a mother, Kokum, currently a newly appointed external Indigenous advisor with the Winnipeg Police Service, and the executive director of External Indigenous Relations at U of W. The former ICMP Canada Director of Missing Children, Residential Schools and Engagement, a former CBC host and journalist, CTV political commentator, entrepreneur, and Cree translator. In 2015 to 2018, Sheila became the first female Grand Chief of Manitoba Kowatoni Okimakanak, and continues to provide leadership on issues impacting Indigenous people, including the issues of MMIWG, and shares perspectives on intergenerational impacts of residential schools. She released a documentary on MMIW titled 1,200 Plus, and released a memoir called My Privilege, My Responsibility, which we have here tonight as well. Our special guest this afternoon, Dr. Bruce McIvor, is a partner at First Peoples Law LLP. His work includes both litigation and negotiation on behalf of Indigenous peoples across Canada. Bruce is recognized nationally and internationally as a leading practitioner of Aboriginal law in Canada. His collection of essays entitled Standoff, Why Reconciliation Fails Indigenous People and How to Fix It, was published in the fall of 2021. Bruce is a member of the Manitoba Métis Federation. To tell us more, please join me in welcoming our guest.
Sheila North, the Bonabee Cree Nation. Hi everyone, I'm so happy to see all of you. I'm from the Bonabee Cree Nation, as a friend just told us. And my name is Sheila North. An elder has taught me that I have to use my mother tongue when I speak in public first to acknowledge and recognize my sovereignty as an Innu Cree person. So I do that for our people and for my family. And that was a very short bio of you. That was a little bit uneven, but I'm glad we're going to be spending the next few minutes talking to you and learning about you and some of the reasons why you authored these books, but also particularly this one. But thank you all for coming. We will save some time for your questions. I have a few, and if you have people you think that should be here, bring them tomorrow to the U of W, because we're going to be doing this again at the U of W tomorrow afternoon, and you're all more than welcome to come there as well and with other people. But I'm so happy to have you here, Bruce. Thank you for coming back to Winnipeg and spending time with us to talk about this. And I have to admit that I wasn't a huge follower of your work, but only because I'm too busy, not because it's not worth it. I'm actually tackling that myth of normal right now. It's a massive book. So that's where I'm at right now. But I did get a chance to read yours, and I have lots of stickies of everything. I thought if I ever got to meet him, I want to ask him some questions. And then they asked me to host here, so I'm so happy about that. So first of all, I guess I'll say too, one thing that I really like about this book is, as an Indigenous woman, a Cree woman that had children at an early age, and this just started working and owning my own business and getting into school, getting into careers, getting into leadership. I never had time to go to university. I don't have any degrees behind my name. I still have unfinished education that I want to finish at the U of W. So I didn't have time to do any of this stuff and learn. Anything that I've learned was along the way. And I have to say, picking up this book and then reading it in the first few pages, it felt like I was in school and that I got to summarize and validate everything that I've learned through your eyes and through your interpretation. But it helped me get me up to speed of where we're at in Canada, in this country, in this state called Canada. that I think a lot of people that were in our situation might benefit from. People, Indigenous people that didn't necessarily get to post-secondary because of many different reasons. And so I think it's for all of us that want to learn about reconciliation. So let's talk about that.
Sure.
Give me some of the first reasons why you decided that this was an important book to read, and what motivated you the most to get it out.
Sure. Well, thanks, Sheila, for coming out for this. Thanks to the festival, Plume, and thanks to all of you for showing up on such a beautiful, sunny, amazing fall day in Winnipeg. I really appreciate it because it's key to the work that both myself and Sheila do. To be part of this, you need to be in conversation. You can't just write things or say things and they go off into the ether. You need to have a conversation. I just think that's so crucial, and that means people need to show up. Doing an interview tomorrow on the CBC, and we're going to ask about Truth and Reconciliation Day, and I was thinking about it today. One of the most important things to do is show up. You really do. So I really want to say that I appreciate that so much. And thanks for your comments about what you found useful in the book. It made me think of, and I've got family and friends here today. Thanks for coming out. You know, now I'm this pencil neck geek that lives in Vancouver, but that's not how I grew up, right? I come from a family of 9 of us, and I grew up north of Fisher Branch, just a little bit south of Peguis. And no one I knew had ever gone to university or done any of that stuff. And I've always been really at the forefront of my work from day one. This isn't stuff that smart people that haven't gone to university can't follow. You don't need a university education for this. We were just, my sister Rhonda and I this morning were up at Toulon visiting our mom who's 91, and we were driving back, and man, is she sharp. Like, she is a sharp cookie, but she never graduated from high school. She didn't do that. So in my work, I want to be able to explain this stuff for everyone. And it's one of the things I found frustrating beginning to work in the law. This may come as a surprise to some of you, but there is the odd lawyer that has a huge ego. And I remember thinking at first, why in the world do you have such a huge ego? I know some really smart people, and they aren't lawyers. this isn't that complicated. So when I set out to write this book, I was like, I can explain this stuff. It's not that complicated. And most importantly, if it's not clear, it's my fault. It's not the people that read the book, it's that I've not done a proper job of explaining it. So that was my goal from day one, was just how do I explain this, which seems complicated, but it's not that complicated, in a way that we can all then be part of a more meaningful conversation.
And how did you decide on which order and what to include and not to include?
Right, so for those of you that have done writing projects before, you start off with an idea, as you know, and it kind of gets a life of its own as you go along. Part of it was because I wrote it before work. So I had to write in small chunks to the detriment of my family life. I'm an extreme early riser. So I'm up and I'm gone. There's a cafe in my neighborhood in Vancouver that opens at 6 o'clock and I'm there. So I could sit down and write for an hour or so. So I needed to do things in chunks. I knew a lot of the questions that I wanted to address, because for those that have not seen the book, it's written as commonly asked questions, followed by a one sentence kind of, here it is. I will tell you what my answer is in one sentence. And then it's about 300 words or so, which is a bit more. So I started writing in that way. I addressed a lot of the questions that I get asked a lot, like, aren't treaties surrender documents? No, they are not. And here's why not. And then I also spent a lot of time going back through all this Supreme Court Canada case law and thinking about it through the lens of what in all these decisions do I think it would be helpful for the general public to know about how the Supreme Court works, right? Like, how do they address these things? It's important for people to know, I think. So I formulated a lot of questions on that basis.
And as you probably know and can imagine, you know, even growing up on the reserve in my home community, we didn't learn about this stuff. And we weren't taught about our treaty rights necessarily. We learned from our families the value of our culture and our languages. But when we got to the city, I can speak for myself, I was told that my Creeness, my language, was not important. And in fact, it was actually garbage, and that we don't, I don't believe that anymore, but I did for a moment. So there's even a lot of Indigenous people that don't know the history and don't know these facts. What do you think would do to a people, not just general public, but Indigenous people, if they got a good grasp of what these rights are and what they mean? What do you think would happen?
I think, well, I think it would be positive. It's standing up with confidence. I think that's a huge part of it, because you know things, but I find for both Indigenous and non-Indigenous people, you're told a bunch of lies, and your position is undermined, constantly undermined. And one of the things I try to do just in my work in general, and with this book, is saying what you've been told by your elders, what you know to be true, that there is support for that in Canadian law. And you can stand up and say that to the government, say it to companies with confidence. And I think that's a big part of it. The work I do in the law across the country, so much of it is working with my clients, and I'm not teaching them things. I'm more saying, you know what? Yeah, you're right. And I can point you to arguments, decisions in the law that support what you're saying. So I find that's very empowering. It's Indigenous people standing up and speaking the truth themselves. And if I can support that, that's just such an honor to do that work.
And education will have a huge role to play in that. What do you hope people will learn first, and also where do they go from here?
Yeah, I think there's a couple of things, and for those that read the book, you'll see it's not all what's the right term? Peaches and cream.
Milk and honey.
Yeah, milk and honey. I am pretty critical because I think there's two things. One is that it's important for Indigenous people to know how they can defend their rights through the law. So you'll get, and I'll get these cases, someone will say, you can't go build that cabin to go and hunt moose or deer or something. Like, no, hey, dude. There's this case called Sundown. It's exactly your situation. Tell the conservation officer to bugger off. You have a right to be here, so that there's support. So that's important, but it's also, I think, really important to know how Canadian law limits Indigenous people. That it's not milk, honey. It's not peaches and cream. And there's this idea sometimes that, oh, the law works in favor of First Nations. They have such advantages. If you really look at how the law is developed, you'll get a better idea of, man, you're in that box. And it's not a box of your making. This is one of the points I repeat in the book, is that understanding the difference between Aboriginal law and Indigenous laws. There's such a fundamental difference, and know how Aboriginal law, which is the law of the colonizer, it's a law that I know a lot about because I work in the colonizer court, how that law, yeah, it sounds pretty good sometimes, but it's also built on a big lie called the doctrine of discovery. And it's structurally built to make sure, well, you can't really make too much trouble for the colonizers. That's how the laws developed. So I really think it's important that Indigenous people have a critical view of the law. And I hope that the book assists them to, wait a minute, I don't accept this, and I know what you're trying to do, and I'm calling it out.
How many people here have read the book so far? Just a few? Okay.
There's a lot of possible sales. I like that.
Well, I'm glad you're here because I think, and I can say, just people can't see on camera, but it's mostly non-Indigenous people here. And it's really, I mean, that's what I'm assuming in my colonized eyes. What do you hope non-Indigenous folks get from this? I think one of the questions that Indigenous people get all the time is, just get over it and get on with the, we're here now. What happened in the past is gone, and you can make a good life for yourself, go move to the city, and all of those things. Like what do you hope that people?
That's such a good point, Sheila. And I hope that if they hear themselves after they read this book and they're saying that, I hope they recognize that that's a form of oppression. That's the discourse.
Not these people, because they're
no, not you, but the people that say that. That's a form of oppression. And one of the things I want to do with the book is that I hope that it gives non-Indigenous people a tool to push back against that with their friends and family in a safe way, but we all have those kinds of, you don't get to choose who your family members are, right? Most of them are fantastic, sis, uncle, they're all nice, they're all great. But you do get ones, right? And you're like, geez.
You guys have those too?
Yeah, you get them, right? So I hope that it helps people that want to say, you know what, let's stop there. Wait a minute, right? And those are some of the best comments I've gotten back from non-Indigenous people that are just, like one of the guys at my local cafe, super guy. And he said, oh, I read your book. I didn't know that because I heard this all the time. And now I get to say, you know what? That's wrong. That is not. So that's one of the things I hope non-Indigenous people particularly find helpful, is to give them the confidence to say, whoa, because if we don't do that, that oppression will just carry on. Silence is not the answer. We need to step up. We need to speak back against those lies.
So there's constant movement and change, right? I think a chief told me one time, and I use it all the time in my talks, when he said, 150 years ago, 150 plus years ago, we were meant to be extinct. We were supposed to be all gone by now. But 150 years later, we're still here. We're journalists, we're doctors, we're lawyers, we're teachers, everything. And in 150 years, where will we be if we keep going on this journey together? So things are changing all the time. But I also saw an interview you did about the significance that maybe people didn't really notice or get when the king came here. Please, let's get into that. What did you see when all of that was going on, and what that meant to the future?
This is one of the things that people that get to know me better, they know there's a lot of things that drive me nuts. Just
We hit a vein here.
Yeah, it drives me crazy. There was a post this morning I saw on LinkedIn, person had made about Truth and Reconciliation Day. Isn't it fantastic that the Vatican has repudiated the doctrine of discovery? I was like, no, it didn't. Don't believe that lie. That's not what the Vatican did. Understand, read what they actually wrote. Like you can read it. They're not taking responsibility. They're basically saying it was those bad colonizer countries that misinterpreted our words. Those aren't the teachings of the church. Give me a break. And then doing nothing in response, not taking responsibility. That's not what the church has done at all. No responsibility. And then if you're going to take responsibility, you can see how worked up I get about this stuff, right? We all should get worked up. It's like, and then do something. Like, where's the land back, church? Where's land back? Where are reparations? And so the same thing with King Charles. That drove me nuts, right? And particularly here, if you're here in the Red River, right? When you think about the history of this place, all this talk about, oh, let's get King Charles in, to show that we're going to push back against Donald Trump and annexing Canada, right? And I had a whole bunch of people, you'll see it all around, their Canadian flags flapping around. Right? Okay, fine, it's what you want to do, fine. It's not my thing, but you want to do that, fine. But I talked to a few people, when I see King Charles, I think about when the Britain annexed my grandfather's home. I come from a family of old guys having children. So my grandfather was born before Confederation. He was 4 years old up at St. Peter's. When all of a sudden, you know, Britain says, here, this is yours, Canada, annexed. There is a history of that. And so to see King Charles there going, now we're going to rely on King Charles to push back against Trump. I just found it so frustrating, so infuriating. I did like the image though of Carney in that little chair off to the side, looking up, right? So I thought about that, and then one of the things is, why don't you stand up and take responsibility for the treaties, okay? You know, here we're in Treaty 1. Take responsibility. We can't trust these colonizers called the federal government and the provincial government. The original agreement was with the crown, not in the legal way the courts talk about the crown, but that relationship with the British crown. Why don't you hold Carney to account, your government? Why don't you do that?
And you talked about during that time too in your interview about how, you know, courts were able to say, you know, the crown is back. It's just symbolic. But the king actually coming here changed that, right?
It just puts the line to it, because my clients, my treaty clients, and I'm fortunate I have treaty clients all across Canada, you know, they'll say our relationship is with the crown. Yeah. And you'll get politicians that go, oh, no, right? It's like, well, wait a minute. But when you want something, there he is.
Yeah.
You wheel him out. Now you're going to stand behind him. It's just that hypocrisy that you see all the time. So, yeah, the Pope, the King, I think for probably a lot of you, drives me nuts with that stuff, because it's a really good example of that gap between the rhetoric and the reality. And I've talked about that a lot in a lot of these talks, and it's, my thinking has kind of evolved a little bit. It's not just hollow rhetoric. It's a way to shut people up. It's a way to disempower Indigenous people. And so it's dangerous. That rhetoric is dangerous. And we really need to stand up and call it out.
Speaking of rhetoric, this didn't make it in your book yet because it didn't happen yet, but Bill C. I knew that would trigger. Bill C-5, national interest versus Indigenous rights. What do you think is closer to having that veto power?
Oh, right. Well, there's a couple of things. So for those, Bill C-5 is the federal government's legislation to just fast track projects of national interest all across the country. The way it works is, if they say your pipeline or the Port of Churchill, right, is in the national interest, boom. They get all their authorizations guaranteed. Doesn't matter what, guaranteed, give certainty. I always want to give the colonizer certainty. That's the goal they're looking for all the time. This is a way to, and it's a shameless way to just manipulate the law to oppress Indigenous people. I think probably one of the best books I read this year is by a British historian, Caroline Elkins, and it's called The Legacy of Violence, A History of the British Empire. It's a really powerful, powerful book, and she shows mainly for the 20th century how the British Empire operated across the globe using state-sanctioned violence against local populations. But her main theory is that, and she's got this phrase, it's called legalized lawlessness. Boy, when I read that, did it ever resonate? So it's that history of colonizers changing the law to put Indigenous people offside of the law. Oh, well, we all believe in the rule of law. That's how you criminalize land offenders. That's how they end up in jail. That's how particularly Indigenous women who are, as you know, Sheila, usually at the forefront defending the land. That's how they become criminalized. They're faced with these, military attack, police. That's legalized lawlessness. And so that's what Carney has done. That's what Bill C-5 is about. That's why we should all be outraged by this. That's what they're doing. So when they stand up and say, and Doug Ford's done the
Bill
same
C-5,
C-5 in BC, Bill 15. Oh, well, we're going to now impose the law, and you better follow the law. Wait a minute. You just manipulated the law to get what you want. So for me, it's really important to know what is going on and to know that historical roots to this. This isn't new. This is one of the things I talk about a lot, is it's Canada's ongoing colonization project. It's going on today. It's not history, you're living it. We're all part of it. Bill C-5 is a perfect example.
Mm-hmm. And the idea of having rights not being as important as national interest is always being pitted against in public, right? And that's the message that is being sent out right now with the help of southern neighbors. They're saying they're coming, so we better protect ourselves, and so they're using a lot of. And
so this is one of the things for those that think, oh, the law's boring and blah blah blah, right? It's one of the things that I point out in the book. This argument was raised at the Supreme Court in 1990, because government, when they were first dealing with what are Aboriginal treaty rights under the Constitution, how do they work with the laws and policies of the federal and provincial governments, they got arguments from provincial and federal governments saying, well, public interest trumps Aboriginal treaty rights. Public interest, national, same thing. The court said no, it can't. It's just too vague. What is that? It can't be just a get out of jail free card saying, oh, well, it's in the national interest, so tough luck. And so the courts have dealt with this. It's important to go back now. You don't need to go to law school. Like it says, wait a minute, your own court said you can't do that. So aren't you supposed to follow those principles?
And it feeds into that narrative and even further, I guess, of creating that us versus them mentality, right? And that's, unfortunately, most politicians are not bold enough to make good decisions on their own. They need the public to make big, bold decisions. Usually. Yeah. They didn't need big, bold help when they split the INAC into two and then made a huge, bigger bureaucracy. Yeah. Right. Can you also, I know we only have 5 more minutes for you and I, and then we'll turn it over to everyone. But An elder taught me from Alberta, I've heard her say this many times, maybe you know her, Jean Crochat. Regina, sorry.
Yes,
Regina.
yeah.
She's amazing. Anyone that knows about treaty
Yeah.
knows who she is. She's brilliant. And I've heard her say many times that Canada is not a state. And when I do media interviews myself, I try to throw that in once in a while, but I know that it's not resonating. But let's talk about that a little bit. What does that mean? According to Regina and lots of people that know the treaties, they say Canada is not a state because, Canada is a state because it's not a nation. Because to be a nation, you have to have the language, the land, and the culture. And Canada doesn't have its own anything like that, right?
Yeah, yeah.
How do you talk to people about that?
Well, it comes up a lot now, and particularly thinking about Regina, as some of you probably know, there are people in Alberta that want to have a referendum
Yes.
to separate from the rest of Canada. And it's like, what are you talking about? Right? What are you talking about? You don't know your law, you don't know your own history. For several months, I've been the premier's kind of official opposition in the media, stirring it up, but doing it hopefully in a way that makes people think about these things, right? With Alberta, what I've been reminding people, you're just a junior person at the Confederation table.
Yeah.
It was between the Crown and First Nations. Treaties were forged before there was any such thing as a province of Alberta. You're not Quebec. Not that Quebec gets off the hook, but don't compare yourself to Quebec. You were created pretty well as a territory in 1905. Didn't even have control of Indigenous lands until 1930. But it's a good example because this narrative that gets developed, we're talking about it in school. When I went to school here in Manitoba, of course, we didn't do Atlantic acknowledgement. We sang "O Canada" at the beginning of the day, and we sang "God Save the Queen" at the end of the day. Every day, getting up and singing "God Save the Queen." We would change the lyrics around. That kind of narrative gives rise to this fiction that Canada is a country. Well, even if you accepted it was a country, it's a country built on a big lie. Is that the country I see people, they wanted to, time's getting short, differentiate themselves from the Americans? Right? Well, it's just built on a big lie. It's called the doctrine of discovery. Woohoo! That's what you're proud of. We need to, it's about truth telling, and truth telling is uncomfortable. Right? You know this. You make a lot of people uncomfortable when you tell the truth. And I think for non-Indigenous people, if you want to commit to something on September 30th, commit to accepting being uncomfortable. Right? Just accept it.
We're uncomfortable.
Exactly. That's the least that you can do. I've got these shirts that I made up. They say on the back, if reconciliation is making you feel good, you're doing it wrong.
I have one of those too.
It's like, be uncomfortable and don't put Indigenous people on the spot to defend themselves. Explain themselves.
And the opportunity to do that is during election times, right? When people knock on your door and in the open forums, ask questions and make decisions based on.
It's a cold calculus of politics, right? if a bunch of non-Indigenous people get upset about something, politicians are much more likely to pay attention. We saw this here in Winnipeg. One of my long-term clients is Sheila 40. I worked with them for years trying to get that damn road built. But when all of a sudden there was the Friends of Shoal Lake 40 from Winnipeg, and that started with the churches and everything else.
With that singer.
Yeah,
Yeah,
There was
I did a story about him.
fantastic. But man, then people started paying attention. People really started paying attention. So you think about if you expand that out.
Stephen Bell.
Oh, yeah.
Yeah.
So Bill C5, right? No, this isn't right. You want to be proud of being Canadian? Speak back against that. Hold politicians to account. That's what you can do. It's just so valuable. And the more people that do it, people, whoa, geez, maybe I better be careful. Right, so.
I'll tell you quickly about that Steve Bell story,
Yeah.
because I had the privilege of doing a story about him when he did that. And I think it helps to create allyship and to help allies figure out a way that they can help. And that basically just means helping from wherever you are, from whatever position you're at. So I interviewed Steve Bell because he was going around church to church singing and asking all the churches to change their marquee to say, got water, Winnipeg, thanks Shoal Lake.
Yeah.
And he said that he went from church to church and he's told them, I'll do a free concert for you if you change your moniker to say, got water, thanks Shoal Lake. So I asked him what motivated him, why did he do that? So in short, he said he went with his dad, who was a chaplain in a Stony Mountain. I think it was Stony Mountain, but he went to prison, and he would go with his dad every Wednesday. And they would set up chairs, set up coffee, blah, 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 since he was a little boy.
Yeah.
And he said, these people became my friends, and they taught me how to play guitar, they taught me how to sing. And then he said, one day, I asked my dad when I was older, like, how come most of these people are Native men? And at the time, that was the common term. And his dad simply said to him, that's a really good question. Don't ever stop asking it.
Yeah.
So he said, for me, this is me asking it. And he says, and he has the Junos and lots of accolades in music, has a career. He said, I owe my whole life, my music and my career and my livelihood to these Indigenous men that are perceived to be not valuable.
Yeah.
That's my word, but
Yeah.
But he turned it around. He turned something that he learned from that moment, and I thought that's a really good story for people to hear, because you know you can make something out of and create change out of that. And now Shoal Lake has helped with that story, right?
Oh, it's huge.
Yeah.
It's huge. It's huge.
Okay.
So yeah. So just a really good example, because I know particularly with the current political situation nationally, internationally, we can all feel a bit powerless. Right? It's so depressing.
Mhm.
But being able to find ways to feel like you're doing something productive just lifts you up and all the people around you.
And I think you'll find that you're not going to have to start from scratch, because there was a lot of movement before Steve Bell and the
Yeah.
churches got involved. They just enhanced it at
Yeah.
that moment, and non-Indigenous people started paying attention
Yeah.
to that. So that helps a lot. So we'll turn it over to some questions, but I also will have to say that it drives me nuts when I hear, I don't want to say his name down south, but, and even our prime minister, when they talk about my land, our waters, our resources, and it just drives me bonkers when I hear them say that.
The one that we see a lot is, or Indigenous people.
Yeah.
So what the hell?
Yeah, that's another one.
Or First Nations. What?
Another thing we could do as geeks is also go to the Manitoba archives and look and read at the Bay archives and the history, and just plain English, how they came into this territory, for example, and just staked a claim, and then, so this is ours. So the Hudson Bay Company staked a claim and then sold it later to
Yeah.
Canada.
Do that or go to the Manitoba Museum. I remember I was one of those children, you know, and they still do, right? You get bussed in here to Winnipeg if you don't make too much trouble. They'll take you to the old spaghetti factory. But they'll take you to the museum. It was the Museum of Man and Nature or something first. I took my kids there a few years ago. It hasn't changed that much. You walk in, and I've written a piece about this. Now they've got the buffalo and everything else, but it's like a lot of it's a diorama of this typical Indigenous family, First Nation, with the bows and arrows and the loincloth. Okay, so this is where it starts. And then you walk through, oh, there's the non-such. Civilization has arrived with all the bales and the goods all around. And then you walk on, oh, here's Winnipeg, right? 1890s or so. It's this lie that's told to you, told to children in Manitoba, still going on. This is the arc of progress. You know, Indigenous people are in that diorama, and then okay, goodbye, and you're on. So I think it creates an opportunity. Take your own kids or take your grandchildren and speak back against that. It's like what you're saying, Sheila. Ask questions. Why is it like this?
Yeah.
What's not said? I think it's useful.
Okay, let's ask our audience if you have any questions. We have a few minutes for that, and microphone will go.
Don't feel shy about the questions. I'm used to going to court. I have a question, Mr. McIvor.
Okay, so you say that you don't have any faith in King Charles when he came to Winnipeg. Do you have any faith that the future King William will do anything about the reform, and especially since that seems to be a little bit on the horizon, given the King Charles's advanced age and probably health, when William becomes king?
No. And a bit more. I'm working on another book. That's how it works. You get one done, you're partway through it, new one before this book is out. And I've been thinking about colonization and how it's like a disease, right? It's like a disease. And it gets implanted and then it gets passed on. I think the royal family has that disease. And I think it'll just get passed on from one generation to the next. I don't think you can expect a huge change.
Yeah, and given your comment about Prime Minister Carney taking on responsibility and taking action, you can't possibly, given the fact that Carney is among the Liberals, you can't possibly expect the Conservatives to do anything, especially if Poilievre had ever become Prime Minister, or probably will in the future.
Well, a couple of things.
Yeah,
I would like to start a rumor that Carney actually has a Conservative Party membership. I think it must be true.
I think a lot of
because there's a lot of disappointed NDPers out there. There might be some here in the room. I'm going to vote for Carney because I don't want Poilievre and that crazy conservative agenda. Whoa! Look what you see, right? The thing with Poilievre, one of the things I find fascinating, and you can go and search for this, the C did a piece about it. His infatuation with John A. Macdonald, that gets really weird. He dresses up like John A. Macdonald. He wants his picture taken with statue. And when you think
Is that
about
the
it,
rumor you're trying to start?
no, this one's true. The Carney piece.
And one
was-
last question,
Well, we all-
do you think that the Indigenous people need to form their own government party in order to do anything?
I let Indigenous people decide that for themselves. They get enough advice from lawyers. They don't need my advice on that. Where's the next one?
Any more quick questions? Oh, always back. And one more.
Yes, good afternoon. My name is Leonard Ross and I'm from Pimicikamak, Cross Lake. Maybe Mr. McIvor, maybe you can explain a little bit about the doctrine of discovery. I think that's where everything came from.
Yeah, thank you. Yeah, so I've got a short piece in my book on that, but I think just to keep it short, this is this underlying lie that is that the country of Canada, that colonizers can just show up, plant the flag, or
Which is what they did.
yes, that's what they did, or issue a charter to a bunch of friends of the king for Rupert's Land and somehow acquire an interest in Indigenous land and displace Indigenous law making. This is not historical. This goes on today in Canada because we are Canadians. We're always looking for a euphemism, some way to talk about the same thing without being, offside on the politics, because the doctrine of discovery has been renounced all around the world. So in Canada, we call it the assertion of crown sovereignty. It's the same damn thing. And one of the things, Sheila, to know about the law is that when the Supreme Court started to interpret Section 35 of the Constitution, which protects Aboriginal and treaty rights, they started from the basis of we are not questioning the doctrine of discovery. We accept that. No one's ever questioned it. This is what this is like. Well, I could think of a few people that have questioned it, but that's what they said. So it's based on that. When you hear about duty to consult, all these people that take part in that, you're just taking part in the doctrine of discovery. Because the duty to consult is based on the lie that Indigenous people don't have laws that they can make decisions for themselves. It's based on the lie that the Crown makes all the decisions, and maybe we'll consult about yours. So it is insidious, and it's part of our everyday life. And you should keep that in mind.
Because duty to consult doesn't necessarily go on the side of Indigenous wishes anyways, right? At the end, it's whatever. the
No,
government
because
thinks.
that's how the duty to consult works. This is an example of what I was talking about. The law develops, but don't give Indigenous people too much power. Right? So yeah, we'll come and consult, but at the end of the day, provincial or federal governments will make decisions. And if you then say, no, I don't accept it, you can end up in jail based on the rule of law.
There's one more question.
Oh, hello. I was just wondering, I have the time off to go down to the Forks on Tuesday for Reconciliation Day. And I was thinking, as an average Winnipegger, Manitoba Canadian of 62 years, what am I looking for there? I have been a non-racist since I was born, okay? I've lived here, I've gotten along with everybody, but I sure do have a headache with what's going on in society nowadays. So, and this isn't a sarcastic question. I'm saying, if you were me, just a regular average Joe, okay? What should I be paying attention to down there on Tuesday afternoon? Should I just go down and have a good time, have a coffee and see what's going on down there? Listen to the music. I'm sure there might be some entertainment and things like that. But I'm a little bit lost.
Yeah.
I don't know what to think of everything anymore. But it sure does give me a headache, all the rhetoric.
Yeah.
You know, but I'm willing to fight for my,
Yeah.
I don't know what to call them. I say Indigenous brothers. I think we should all live together in harmony.
Yeah.
So where do you think a young 20-year-old person should start with their sort of agenda on where to go and where to fight?
Thank you. Thanks for asking that. One of the first things is, and I know it's a stat holiday here in Manitoba, is to recognize that it's not a holiday. That's a good place to start. It drives me nuts. It's a stat in BC too. Oh, it's a holiday. It's not a holiday, buddy. It's not holidays. You've got a responsibility. Non-Indigenous people have a responsibility on that day. Really, like focusing on that day. And if you're looking for something, look for something that's going to make you feel comfortable. Not have a good time. Okay, have a good time. You want to have a good time. But that's not the purpose of the day. It's what's going to make you feel uncomfortable, and then ask yourself why. Why do I feel uncomfortable with this? And that's a good place to start, I think, is starting, but you got to be open to it. A lot of people, they're avoiding anything that might make them feel comfortable. And they just want to have a good time, some food they've not had before, bannock or something, you know, that's not what it's about. So I think that's a good place to start and see where that takes you.
And read the book.
Thank you.
I think that's it for
Yeah, I
questions.
think we can cut the questions there. And then I'll bring it over to Charlene Deal for their closing comments.
Don't move the mic. I get it. Okay. I feel both excited, animated, and a little bit uncomfortable. So let's just take a pause for a second and thank Bruce McIvor and Sheila North for this extraordinary conversation. Lots of learning and in a really extraordinary way to recognize the ongoing presence of Theodore Niizhotay Fontaine in our lives too, who was also a community builder and bridge builder who just was determined to tell the truth. And I would say, Bruce, if you would just take on formally the role of official opposition, I think we might get somewhere. And I was thinking early on when you were talking about hollow rhetoric, one of the things that's been so bracing and uplifting about this conversation is that we can hear you and we can see in your book this determination to speak plainly, speak clearly, and with some brevity so that we can learn, those of us who are outside and wanting very much to engage seriously in this movement toward right relations. It does require discomfort, and it really requires a lot of relearning, unlearning, and I think that the work that you're doing, both of you, is a very important path toward a different understanding of how we all share this place. So I'm very grateful for your time here, your generosity of spirit, and your great energy. And thank you also to you, Sheila, for really bringing such a depth of conversation and for helping us be present on the run up to the National Day for Truth and Reconciliation. I think maybe reading 1 minute for Indigenous Rights, or Indigenous Rights in 1 minute, so I got that backwards, might be a really great commitment for Tuesday. I think that might be a thing. I will let you know about a couple of things that are coming up, but I also want to say that we are gathered here in a place which is also about community building, community making, a place with many kinds of stories, many kinds of tellers. So very, very grateful, as always, to be partnering with McNally Robinson, who champion really important conversations and big books, big important books. So will you give a round of applause to our hosts here? This is almost the last event of Thin Air 2025. There's one about to start at Whodunit Bookstore, or maybe it has already started. I've sort of lost track of the time. And also, what day is it? It feels like day 703 of this year's festival. But it was a Sunday, and we're landing this plane. We're really, really glad to have all of you here as part of this very important annual event, and to have had such a great conversation. We have an ongoing partnership with McNally and featuring quite a few writers in the upcoming days, including one on Friday night. Thomas Wharton will be here from Edmonton talking with Ben Sigurdsson. And Subankam Thamavangsa will be here with Lindsay Wong on October 21st. Maybe particularly of interest to this group is I'm really happy to report that we have a new date for the launch of Duncan McCready's book of poetry called Only the Scent of You Remained. It was listed as part of our festival offerings this past week and was postponed, and it is now confirmed for Sunday, October 26th at 2 p.m. with Rosanna Deerchild in the host chair. That's going to be one for the record books, I think. I will let you know that the signing procedure will be quite straightforward. Bruce is just going to come over to the table here and you can get books signed. And I'm pretty sure you could grab a book of Sheila's and have her sign it too. She probably would be willing to do that. Who's not willing to do that? And the only real rule is that you have to pay for the book before you leave the store. They do it like that here. And before we do break, let's just give one more round of great appreciation to Bruce McIvor and Sheila North.
Come on over, Bruce, before you get mobbed. Thanks, everyone. Have a good rest of the beautiful day.